SKOL Vikings, let's win this game.
Vikings fans, you ever feel like the news cycle around this team is coming at you like a blizzard off Lake Superior? Because the last few days in Minnesota have been exactly that. Headline after headline, each one making you pause and ask what direction this franchise is really steering toward. A major defensive piece just had his deal adjusted as the front office hustles to beat the clock before the new league year. At the same time, a veteran just landed on the open market and instantly becomes part of the most important battle on the roster. There's also buzz building around a former top draft sensation who could jolt the offense like plugging a power cable into it. And just to keep things spicy, there's tension brewing in the locker room after a veteran fired a shot straight at the defensive scheme. So buckle up for a minute, because the first development already tells you how quickly the wheels are spinning behind the curtain in Minnesota. One thing became crystal clear this week: the Vikings front office is grinding like a pit crew trying to keep the car from falling apart before the green flag drops on the new league year. The salary cap situation wasn't just tight, it was the kind of financial storm cloud that keeps executives staring at spreadsheets long after midnight. At one point, Minnesota was staring at one of the worst cap situations in the entire NFL. We're talking about a hole so deep it felt like trying to climb out of a canyon. When that happens, big contracts become the levers you pull. That brings us to a familiar face in the secondary, a guy who's basically been a permanent fixture on the field since he arrived. Someone who, whether people realize it or not, has become stitched into the recent identity of the purple and gold defense. That player is Byron Murphy Jr. The Vikings restructured the cornerback's contract, a move that immediately freed up more than $11 million in cap space. On paper, it looks like bookkeeping, but inside NFL front offices, those adjustments can flip the entire financial board. Suddenly, the team can breathe again. To really understand the pressure Minnesota was under at one point, they were sitting more than $40 million above the cap limit. That's not a small headache, that's a migraine. Now the gap is shrinking. Between Murphy's restructure and adjustments involving other star players, the Vikings have carved that deficit down significantly. It's not perfect yet, but the panic level has dropped. And this move also says a lot about how the team views Murphy. Remember, he came to Minnesota after starting his career in Arizona, where things were a bit of a roller coaster, including a back injury that had people around the league raising eyebrows. Since putting on purple and gold, though, he's found his footing. Over 3 seasons with the Vikings, he's put together solid production, more than 200 combined tackles, over 30 passes defended, and 11 interceptions. There's another detail that matters in this league. The guy shows up. Murphy rarely misses games, and that reliability is like gold in the NFL. During the 2024 season, he even reached the Pro Bowl after grabbing 6 interceptions and knocking away 14 passes. That kind of year can completely reshape how people view a player. Last season, the numbers cooled a bit: 71 tackles, 7 passes defended, and 2 interceptions. But the consistency was still there. And clearly, the Vikings see him as a key piece moving forward. Restructuring his contract isn't a sign of doubt. If anything, it's the opposite. It's the kind of move teams make when they expect a player to remain part of the foundation. But here's the reality. These maneuvers show the Vikings are still right in the middle of a financial reset. More work is coming. Tough choices could still be around the corner, possibly involving some very recognizable names on this roster. So let me throw it to you. How do you feel about Byron Murphy Jr. anchoring the cornerback spot for this defense? Do you trust him as the team's top guy out there on the edge? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because the next topic jumps straight to the position that can flip an entire season upside down, and the quarterback who just hit the market could shake the whole offense like a thunderclap. Quick timeout, folks. If you're enjoying these breakdowns, hit that subscribe button and jump into the crew here on the channel. It costs nothing, and it helps keep this Vikings family growing. Every offseason has those moments where one piece moves and suddenly the whole chessboard shifts. It's not always a trade or a signing right away. Sometimes just the fact that a player becomes available sends teams across the league scrambling to imagine new scenarios. That's exactly what just happened. Out of nowhere, a veteran quarterback popped onto the market. This isn't some unknown name either. It's a player who's been through the roller coaster ride of the NFL, ups, downs, setbacks, comebacks, and has proven he can still run an offense when the circumstances line up. The situation got even more intriguing when reports started circulating that he views the opportunity in Minnesota with serious respect. The quarterback in question is Geno Smith. Yep, that Geno Smith, the same one who shocked the league with that career revival in Seattle a few years ago. A guy plenty of people had already written off before he came roaring back like a comeback story out of a movie. Now he's officially available after the Raiders made the surprising decision to release him, and that raised a lot of eyebrows around the league. Remember, Smith had only recently arrived in Las Vegas after being traded by the Seahawks, but things didn't unfold the way the Raiders hoped, and the relationship ended quickly. With that move, Smith instantly entered the free agent market, and whenever a quarterback with that resume becomes available, teams start examining the situation like scouts around a campfire. For Minnesota, the fit is intriguing. The Vikings are still trying to figure out exactly where they're headed at quarterback. There's youth in the room, there's potential, but there's also uncertainty hovering over the position. In moments like this, bringing in an experienced veteran starts to sound logical. Geno Smith brings 12 seasons of NFL experience. He's worn jerseys for the Jets, Giants, Chargers, Seahawks, and Raiders. That means he's seen almost every locker room dynamic the league can throw at a player, and he's delivered real production too. Back in 2022, he led the entire NFL in completion percentage, nearly 70%, while throwing for more than 4,000 yards. That season put his name right back in the spotlight. It's no accident he earned Pro Bowl selections in both 2022 and 2023. There's also an interesting financial twist here. Because the Raiders still owe Smith a significant portion of his salary even after releasing him, another team could potentially sign him for a much smaller contract, possibly even close to the league minimum. For a team juggling cap issues like Minnesota, that matters a lot. Now picture the scenario. A veteran quarterback arrives, training camp becomes a battleground, and the younger players suddenly feel the pressure to sharpen their game. Those competitions can raise the entire offense like a rising tide. But there's another angle to this story. Quarterbacks with that much experience rarely show up just to hold a clipboard. Competitors want the keys to the car, and that's where the big question starts echoing among fans. If Geno Smith came to Minnesota, would he simply compete? Or would he expect to run the offense? Because depending on that answer, the franchise could be steering toward a very different future. And here's the twist. He isn't the only quarterback name floating around the Vikings right now. There's another one gaining traction, and it might be even bigger. Whenever a quarterback who once went first overall suddenly becomes available, the entire league snaps to attention like someone rang a bell in the middle of the room. It doesn't matter if the career has had bumps in the road, injuries, inconsistency, whatever the case may be, the sheer talent attached to a player like that always sparks conversation. That's exactly what started happening this week. Quiet whispers began circulating inside NFL circles. At first, it sounded like typical offseason speculation, but then reporters who closely track quarterback movement started hearing the same thing from multiple directions. And before long, Minnesota's name kept popping up in the middle of those conversations. Soon enough, it became clear the connection might actually have real substance. The player generating all this buzz is Kyler Murray. Yes, that Kyler Murray, the former #1 overall pick who entered the NFL carrying the reputation of a human highlight reel. A quarterback with a cannon for an arm, lightning mobility, and the ability to improvise when a play completely falls apart. For several seasons, he was the centerpiece of the Arizona Cardinals franchise. He delivered strong years, earned Pro Bowl recognition, and had stretches where it genuinely looked like Arizona had secured its quarterback of the future. But the NFL moves fast, sometimes like a river after heavy rain. Injuries crept into the picture. Consistency faded. The gap between expectations and results widened. Now Murray has landed on the market, and the second that became public, Minnesota immediately surfaced as a possible landing spot. This wasn't just fans dreaming up scenarios, it came from information circulating within league circles. One reporter who closely tracks quarterback movement indicated there's real belief Murray could sign with the Vikings when the next stage of the offseason begins. That doesn't mean a deal is already done, but it does reveal something important. Around the league, people see Minnesota as a logical destination, and that opens the door to a massive debate, because Murray isn't the kind of quarterback who joins a roster to watch from the sidelines. He's 28 years old and still in the physical prime of his career. He has the talent to run an offense. If he does land in Minnesota, the question instantly becomes unavoidable. Would the job be decided in an open competition, or would his arrival signal a full shift in the franchise's long-term strategy? Among Vikings fans, opinions are already flying like sparks off a welding torch. Some love the idea, a mobile quarterback capable of turning broken plays into explosive gains. Others hesitate. His style demands adjustments in offensive design, different reads against defenses, and shifts in overall philosophy. There's also the challenge of adjustment itself. Learning a new playbook, building timing with receivers, and finding rhythm in a new locker room takes time. But there's another layer here that makes the situation even more interesting. Financially, Murray could actually start out relatively affordable. A large portion of his salary would still be covered by his previous team. That means Minnesota could potentially bring in a high-level talent without immediately carrying the full financial weight. In other words, big upside, limited early cost, and a franchise still deciding what shape its offense will take moving forward. That's why this conversation keeps gaining momentum. Now I want to hear from you. Would you bring Kyler Murray to Minnesota, or would you steer the team in a completely different direction at quarterback? Tell me down below, because while the offense is swirling with possibilities, another massive decision behind the scenes involved the biggest weapon in the Vikings offense. When a franchise starts adjusting the contract of its biggest offensive star, every fan's radar lights up immediately. Not because something's wrong, but because it usually means serious maneuvering is happening behind the curtain. That's exactly what unfolded in Minnesota. The Vikings front office needed to reshape the team's finances, and that meant using one of the classic tools of NFL roster management, pushing money into future seasons to solve a current cap squeeze. But the name attached to this move isn't just any player. We're talking about Justin Jefferson, the Vikings' #1 receiver, one of the most electric talents in the entire league, and easily one of the most beloved players fans in purple and gold have embraced in recent years. His contract has now been restructured. To be clear, this isn't a pay cut, and it's not a release. It's the standard NFL maneuver where portions of a player's salary are reorganized to create immediate cap relief. Moves like this are extremely common when dealing with massive long-term contracts, and Jefferson's deal certainly qualifies. Back in 2024, he signed a 4-year extension worth $140 million, one of the biggest wide receiver contracts in NFL history. What the Vikings did was rearrange parts of that structure to ease the cap pressure heading into the upcoming season. The goal is simple: make sure the team is under the league's salary cap before the new year officially kicks off. But nothing in the NFL comes without consequences. Some of that financial weight now shifts into the future. The problem doesn't vanish, it just moves further down the calendar. Still, this strategy has become incredibly common across the league. Competitive teams regularly restructure deals with star players to maintain roster flexibility, and it makes perfect sense when the player involved is someone like Jefferson. Since entering the NFL in 2020, he's basically turned consistency into an art form at the wide receiver position. Year after year, he produces, even when the offense struggles or the quarterback situation feels like musical chairs. Take last season, for example. Jefferson still finished with 84 receptions and over 1,000 receiving yards. The touchdown total was low, just 2, but anyone watching the games knows that had far more to do with instability at quarterback than with Jefferson's performance. He remains the type of player who tilts the field. Defenses frequently dedicate 2 defenders to him, sometimes even 3 depending on the situation. That kind of attention opens doors for everyone else on the offense. So when the front office restructures his contract, it's not a signal of doubt. It's a vote of confidence. The Vikings fully expect Jefferson to remain the centerpiece of this offense for years to come. There's also another layer to the timing here. His restructure happened alongside other contract adjustments across the roster. All of it is part of a frantic push to beat the salary cap deadline before the new league year begins next week. Even after these moves, though, there's still work left. Tough decisions could still arrive: player cuts, trades, unexpected exits. And that takes us straight into the next situation. Because one veteran defender is already expected to leave the team, and before the exit even becomes official, he dropped a comment that's raising eyebrows about the Vikings' defensive scheme. When a veteran player is heading toward the exit door, the usual script is polite and predictable. Thank the fans, appreciate the opportunity, and quietly move on. But sometimes someone decides to light a match on the way out. That's basically what just happened with the Vikings defense. Reports had already been circulating that Minnesota planned to part ways with an experienced defensive player, someone who arrived with a strong reputation and even recent Pro Bowl recognition on his resume. Yet his stay with the Vikings ended up being much shorter than most people expected. The player at the center of the story is Javon Hargrave. The defensive tackle joined the team less than a year ago, carrying big expectations. The idea was to strengthen the interior defensive line and generate steady pressure on opposing quarterbacks. On paper, it looked like a perfect match. Hargrave had produced strong seasons elsewhere and was known for collapsing the pocket from the inside, a skill that's incredibly valuable in today's NFL. But inside the Vikings' defensive structure, things didn't play out the way many hoped. Early in the season, there were flashes. In the opener against the Chicago Bears, for instance, he recorded 7 quarterback pressures. That performance fired up the fan base right away. But as the season rolled along, his impact gradually faded. By the end of the year, the numbers painted a clear picture. Hargrave finished with 31 total pressures and a pressure rate of 10.5%, both his lowest marks since 2018. In 6 different games, he didn't generate a single quarterback pressure. For someone whose main assignment is exactly that, those numbers become hard to ignore. Age is certainly part of the equation. Hargrave recently turned 33, and the physical grind of playing in the trenches every snap is brutal in this league. But there might be another factor lurking in the background. Before his departure was even official, Hargrave posted a message on social media that immediately grabbed attention. The comment basically suggested that if you're a defensive lineman looking to rack up quarterback pressures, Brian Flores' defensive system might not be the best place to do it. That's a pretty direct critique. And the idea didn't come out of thin air. Some players have previously mentioned that Flores' scheme assigns very specific responsibilities to interior linemen. Defensive tackles are often asked to occupy blockers so linebackers and edge rushers can create the pressure. In other words, the focus isn't always on individual statistics, it's about the entire defense working like a machine with interlocking gears. In fact, a former Vikings captain once admitted he initially questioned his role before realizing how disruptive the system could be against opposing offenses. Still, when a departing player publicly questions the structure, it naturally sparks debate, especially during a moment when the team is reshaping the roster under salary cap pressure. Hargrave is expected to be officially released before free agency begins, and he likely won't be the only one leaving. Several other players could also be on their way out, with some possible releases already circulating in league discussions. In other words, the roster shakeup isn't finished yet, and that raises a bigger question. What kind of team are the Vikings actually trying to build going forward? Because when you combine financial restructuring, uncertainty at quarterback, and criticism inside the defense, it becomes clear Minnesota is stepping into a major turning point. Now zoom out for a second and look at the whole landscape. The Vikings have reshaped major contracts, including a key defensive player and the biggest star on offense, in order to steady their salary cap situation. At the same time, the quarterback market suddenly opened new doors. A seasoned veteran became available, while a former #1 overall pick might be eyeing Minnesota as his next stop. Meanwhile, a departing defender is stirring debate about the defensive system as he walks out the door. When you stack all of that together, the message becomes pretty clear. The Vikings are standing at a crossroads filled with big decisions. This isn't just routine roster tweaking, it's about defining where the franchise is heading. So now I want your take. Do you feel like the Vikings are laying the foundation for something strong in the future? Or does it still seem like the team hasn't fully locked in its long-term plan yet? Stay tuned. SKOL Vikings, let's go!